Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Maritime SheEO Conference 2021. And I'm so excited to be your moderator today on this panel. And just a little bit background about myself. I'm Fiza Gujaran. I have worked in the human capital space for 20 years or so. And, over the years working in human capital, I have just a great passion and desire for making sure women in workforce are really thriving and motivated and not just included as part of, the diversity efforts all over the world. But I have been very fortunate myself as a woman to have the opportunity to sort of have a career that spans across various countries, being able to work with firms that have been very encouraging of women and being in an industry that has been encouraging of women. I've spent most of my time in financial services and consulting. But today, I'm going to talk to all of you about the maritime industry and women in maritime industry and diversity in our recruiting process. And I'm very excited to talk to you about, the challenges and the great ideas that you have seen come through in your experiences working this industry, and then share about, what other industries are doing and, what can we do to make this a really diverse place for everybody. So with that, I'd like to take some time to introduce, give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are, and then we'll dive into the panel questions. So Karen, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about your background and your sort of connection and passion to the Maritime SheEO conference.
Okay, so hello everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here to support diversity, gender equality, and most especially, women empowerment. Okay, I have been in the maritime industry for, I'm going to be on my 15th year in the industry come June 1st or June 2nd rather, sorry. I have been connected before, or the start of my career in the maritime industry was with the training. And then eventually I assumed the role of Executive Director of Business Development for Philippine Transmarine Carriers Incorporated. And eventually, or the current position that I have is the Senior Vice President for Cruise Operations. So obviously this involves a lot of recruitment efforts, and primarily for Filipinos. But I am so lucky to say that as far as Philippines is concerned, I think we're basically practicing a gender equality for the past few years, especially in our industry, in the maritime industry.
Great, thank you, Karen. Very nice to have you on the panel today.
Thank you.
That, we'll go to Paul Butterworth. Paul, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Fiza. Thank you. Thank you for that. As you say, I'm Paul Butterworth. Hello from London. I'm a partner in a company called Odgers Berndtson. We're one of the top 6 largest international headhunting firms. We've got 60 offices and 1,000 people globally. I lead our maritime shipping practice, which has got 9 partners around the world. And I also chair our global transport practice. I've been in the maritime industry for nearly 30 years. I know it's hard to believe, but I started very young. But my first career was at sea for 12 years, and I captained 2 ships. I'm also the chairman of the Seafarers Charity, which is a UK-based international charity focused on seafarer welfare. And you might have heard from us recently as we launched and ran the Seafarers International Relief Fund, which raised over $1 million this year, primarily from industry, aimed at helping Indian seafarers and their families get vaccines and help during the COVID period. So a lot of what I do is really focused on diversity and inclusion, but also always finding the best person for the role.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you and welcome. Next, Jason, we'll go to you and tell us a little bit about yourself. Jason, can you hear us?
Sorry, you said to me.
Oh, okay.
You broke up a little bit when you mentioned my name. Sorry about that.
So maybe I just say that again. Jason, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, thanks, Fiza. Yeah, I'm Jason Nangle. So I'm the Managing Director for Faststream Recruitment, Asia Pacific region. So I'm based here in Singapore. I've been with Faststream for about 11 years. So I joined them. Faststream is pure maritime. So I joined them 11 years ago in the UK. I was transferred here probably about 8 years ago, and I've been here since. So Faststream is a business. We're a global maritime recruitment specialist. So we were founded in the late 90s. Our business works with kind of shipping companies, marine companies that offer products and services. We also do a lot of logistics, energy, renewables, those types of things. I'm still very, very hands-on in terms of recruitment. I specialize in our executive search level roles, but our business as a whole, we cover roles of all kind of sizes. Big demand at the moment, a few hot topics for us, particularly in the maritime industry, sustainability being one of them. Digitalization's been there for quite some time as well. And of course, diversity and inclusion is a really hot area for our clients coming to us with requirements at the moment. In fact, we've got a campaign at the moment, a global campaign, looking for about 20 different positions for a very large marine services company. And that's a real key focus on attracting female candidates for that as well. So there's an ever-growing demand, and I look forward to talking to you about the subject today.
Great. Thank you, Jason. That's wonderful to hear. Audra, maybe we'll go to you and introduce yourself and tell us more.
Yep. Hi, my name is Audra Drablos. I'm a Sector Development Director for the Maritime Business Unit of Inmarsat. For those of you who don't know Inmarsat, Inmarsat is a global mobile satellite communication provider. Our history is really intertwined with IMO and safety at sea. So we're, pretty much an integral part of the maritime industry. But we also work in aviation, enterprise, and global governments. I've been working in the maritime industry for just over 10 years now. But I actually started my career in London in the financial industry. I'm a qualified actuary, but family life brought me to Norway, where I started in the maritime industry, looking at trends and innovations in the maritime industry, and converting those to products and services that Inmarsat can provide. So that's my background. Really looking forward to talking about diversity and inclusion in the maritime industry. I think there's a lot of progress coming into the maritime industry. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for women in the coming years. So really looking forward to discussing how we can promote that more. Great.
Well, welcome, Audra. And I think the last person right now we have is Teresa. So Teresa, we saved the best for the last, and tell us more about you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So my name is Teresa Peacock. I'm with Spinnaker. We are maritime people experts founded by shipping people. We've been going for about 25 years now. And we help people with their career moves within the maritime environment. We only specialize in maritime, so we do nothing else. And we've placed people in around about 70 odd countries over the years. And we do everything from your chartering functions and your operations and commercial through technical, legal, HR, finance, and so on, but all within the maritime field. I've been in search and selection for over 30 years. I've been in the shipping sector for just over 13 years. So it's interesting for me to have worked in other industries and environments and to be able to bring best practices into the maritime field. I'm also part of the all-party parliamentary group for women in work, and we've created various toolkits to advise industries across the board about how to recruit and retain women. I'm on the board of WISTA, Women's International Shipping and Trading Association, which is a network set up for women. And I'm also on the UK government's Maritime Task Force, looking at diversity and inclusion. So I'm very excited to be here today because obviously diversity and inclusion is very important to me in my everyday job.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And, you know, fun fact is that the first job I ever held was in the maritime industry. I worked for actually a firm, you know, called Satara Shipping, which, you know, at that time, our founder, the SheEO for the SheEO conference, Sanjam, you know, her dad had very kindly hired a college student with no experience whatsoever. And you know, I remember at that time we were working on computers where I was making records of all the shipping containers that would come in. And so, you know, the maritime industry has been very dear to my heart for that reason, is because that's where I started my first real job experience and moved on to other things. So, you know, what I wanted to do is before we get started, you know, we have, I want to share my screen real quick where I can talk a little bit about women in workforce in general and what's happening in the world. And then we'll focus onto the maritime industry in particular. But this was a research done by a couple of my colleagues at AlixPartners. And, you know, the pandemic sort of changed a few things, right, very quickly. And, you know, what we're seeing in the world is a few things that are changing, right? There's more and more remote workforce. There is more enabling gender diverse identity, gender expression in the world. There's a multi-generational workforce for the first time. You know, we're seeing Gen Z to, you know, the millennials to Gen X, Gen Y, and everybody's sort of working together, and there's longer working lives. In general, people are retiring much later, so there's definitely a mix of that. And then there's a lot of push to eliminate this unconscious bias in the workplace, and what that meant before many years ago, or 20 years, or even 10 years ago. There's a lot of sort of drive to change that, and we're going to talk about that a lot today. And there's systematic change. There's more focus on diversity, equity, inclusion in general, and you know, as all of you on this panel, you know, there's hiring diversity experts, right? Like people who really want to focus on diversity hiring. So it's not only people who are focused on hiring, but just like many of you on this panel, there's also a focus on diversity hiring in general. And you know, there's more sort of transparency around it. Mental health, well-being becomes really important in this world. And then we're looking beyond, you know, just tokenism and really truly driving diversity in the true sense, and not just like, oh, we have one woman on a board kind of situation. Like there is a drive to like sort of get 50% women on your boards and stuff like that. With that sort of, according to, you know, the world Bank information, right, there's also sort of a challenge, right? Like, so if you kind of think of it, like the Global Gender Gap reports, you know, that in 2020 states will take another, you know, 100 years to achieve gender equality. So at the same time, while there is a change, there's a lot of gap that needs to be filled, and there's a lot of challenge, right? And there are some stats, I'm not going to go through all of them that you see on the screen, but there's a lot of sort of change in the way women have been thinking about their careers, what they can think they're able to achieve, and careers that they've never thought about before of having. There is a lot of desire to go into that. At the same time, if you see some of these stats, you know, 61% of women think motherhood disrupts their progress opportunities. So there's still sort of that barrier that women face in terms of being women, being mothers, you know, the discrimination sometimes that happens in certain industries. And while there is change and all this positive energy, there's still a long road ahead. And so we're going to talk about some of those challenges, and then how do we solution in our diversity process so that we can attract more women in the maritime industry. Just one last thing, you know, this is, we don't have the maritime industry data over here, and this is again from S&P Global. Yours sort of very high level on where we think share of women in the workforce is from a total industry perspective. And as you can see, financial services is where I work. You know, there's a lot of women, which is, a lot of women are sort of thinking about that career. And then it goes down slowly. And, the lowest level, I think we have communication services. And so it's a mix of, where different industries are. And I don't know if anyone has any information where we think the maritime industry would be compared to all the other industry. But what's interesting is if you take out senior level roles and junior level roles and sort of try to think about where women are, this is the share of women. So in senior management per industry. So women are still at the more junior roles. They still drop out of workforce or choose to do something else, excuse me, when they go into, as they get senior in their career, you start to see the diversity sort of really narrowing. Last but not the least, this is a map that shows portion of the labor force, who are women. And as you can see, global policies and global availability of childcare and support system and culture also makes a big impact in terms of where you see more women in the workforce, where it's the North American and European. And interestingly, African nations sort of have more diversity in terms of where women is, and you see a lighter of that mix when it comes to the Middle East, South America, and some parts of Asia. With that, I want to kind of pause and maybe Teresa, go to you first. And why don't you tell us a little bit more in terms of what you've been doing at Spinnaker and what have you discovered as part of your role of being a part of this diversity initiative for the maritime industry?
Thank you. And now I have prepared a few slides as well, so I can just call that up for you.
Sure.
It was interesting you mentioned statistics of women in the maritime industry. At Spinnaker, we have an HR association, and we do benchmarking and analysis of salaries, hierarchy, levels of position that genders are getting to. And we can break that down by geography, and we can break it down by role types as well. We've got it's about 36,000 pieces of data that we analyze on an annual basis, and then we produce a report. So if anybody wants anything more specific from a particular area or a particular geography or a particular job type, then we can very happily accommodate that. But today I thought I would share our findings from my work with the All-Party Parliamentary Group, which I've been working with for about 4 years now. And the first time I joined them, we focused on how to recruit women for the 21st century. And this is a group of people from across all industries. And we come together, we look at various topics, we share best practice, then we make recommendations into government, and then we produce a toolkit that's available. And this toolkit is available free of charge, so anybody can have access to it. So I want to focus on the first one, how to recruit women for the 21st century, which is apt for today. We also did inclusivity and intersectionality. We did women's well-being at work. And the one we're working on this year is all around preparing women for the 4th industrial revolution. And you mentioned earlier, Fiza, about technology. So that's really how technology, artificial intelligence and automation is going to change roles for women going forward. It's quite a big report. These are some of the issues that it covers, but I know that I'm a bit limited on time today, so I'll just pick out a few relevant ones, which I think is going to be appropriate for the discussion today. So the first thing really is getting women through the door. The employers that we spoke to all said that they struggled to attract female applicants, and that was particularly prevalent in the senior level roles and more so in the male dominated sectors, for example, shipping, aviation, transportation, etc. But the McKinsey report of a couple of years ago highlighted absolutely that a diverse board creates a better profit on your bottom line as an organization. So it's not just a case of we need to be fair and just in everything we do. If you want to put your business hat on, it's been proven that you will have better bottom line profits if you have a more diverse workforce and board. So that's the sort of the business case on actually trying to get women through the door. But starting off now, looking at your advertising, okay? Evidence shows that your job design, your advert placement, and your wording will either encourage or discourage female applicants. So, you know, what you can do is you can use something like a gender decoder. This is a free thing that you can get on the internet. And if you take your advert and you place it into this gender decoder, it will actually tell you whether your language is biased towards one gender or another. It's absolutely fascinating. Please do it. I think you'll be quite surprised with the results, because I certainly was quite surprised. So looking at, I mean, we don't really have time for me to talk too much about the gender pay gap, but in maritime, from our HR Association stats, the gender pay gap is currently 42%. Now, across the industries in the UK, I think it's around 17 or 18%. I haven't checked recently. It was around 17 or 18%. So you can see within maritime, the gender pay gap is absolutely massive. We're not alone though. Aviation is also 40+% with their gender pay gap. Again, I can't really talk too much about salaries and the pay gap, but just if anybody wants any more information on the pay gap, then I'm happy to share our findings with you. But I really wanted to focus on the selection process. Okay, so when we went through the year and when we did the meetings and when we did the best practice pulling together of evidence, these were the recommendations that we came up with. The first thing really is training those on unconscious bias. These people that are sifting the CVs as well as interviewing really should go through an unconscious bias training course. The use of name-blind applications was recommended because we find that a CV can be reviewed thinking it is a female, and it will give different perceptions to if they think the CV is a male. So name-blind applications is quite important. We recommended preset interview questions. So having set interview questions that each candidate answers in the same amount of allotted time, and it gives you a fair gauge as to their responses, rather than allowing a recruit in your own image type of conversation to happen, because we all know that people tend to recruit in their own image, those people that they feel comfortable with, those people that they want to go down the pub and have a drink with perhaps. So preset interview questions are really important. Having a diverse interview panel. Please have a mix of genders on your interview panels. The Maritime Task Force has set up a volunteer group of interviewers who will very happily come and sit on your panel free of charge. It's a free service, so please use it. If you don't feel you have a diverse mix of people on your panel, and we will cherry pick from those with this particular knowledge with what you're interviewing for. So a diverse interview panel for fairness, and allowing candidates to draw upon life experiences, not just workplace skills. Because if people have taken a career break, they will have been involved in other things probably. They will have learned new skills that they can bring into the workforce. It's not just all about workplace skills. And give applicants an equal footing, allot a time, give them 1 hour, and that's their allotted time. Don't allow candidates to go over to 1 hour and a quarter or 1 hour and a half, because then you're giving one set of people an unfair advantage. And finally, providing feedback, especially to those unsuccessful candidates, because that will really help them improve for their future success. And we felt if you applied some of these principles of best practice through your selection process, you will find an impact on your shortlists and who is getting through to interviews. The next thing I really wanted to just mention is how to improve your pipeline of women coming through. And we feel it's really important that you reach out to younger generations, advertising your opportunities, trying to use social media more. Young people today are using social media. I have 2 children, one's just graduated, and they're on social media sourcing internships and jobs. That's where they're going to. So make sure that you are reaching the right audience, getting out and making the younger people aware of our industry. shipping isn't necessarily promoted very well within schools and colleges. I'm also part of something called Inspiring the Future, and we're a group of volunteers, and we go out and we talk about our industry to schools and colleges where this may not be promoted. So get out and promote the industry, rather than people just hearing about it through the bad news stories on the news. Obviously, considering sponsorships and involvement in women's networks like Wista or Women Together. The idea is to get your brand, your company's name in front of those up and coming young women. So from a PR point of view, your sponsorships and involvement in networks. And finally, encouraging female employees to share their journeys with others. Choose the female employees that are good role models in your business and get their stories on the website. Nothing reads better than a successful, inspiring story from a female who can then inspire other females. I don't really have time to talk about occupational segregation, which really is where one demographic group is overall underrepresented within an industry, like some of the STEM sectors and maritime or care. But I did just want to mention one point within maritime. Norway has the highest proportion of women operating at executive leadership team level, 43%. Now, I don't know what your views on quotas are, but whether you're for them or against them, they obviously work, because Norway brought out a quota for female directors in 2006, and now they are leading the world on the number of female executives they have. And something also following on from what Fiza was saying, looking at our stats and our data, women in maritime are most likely to be found in the corporate support functions, crewing, HR, finance, and so on, admin support. But I've got lots of data on females in maritime, so please do reach out for me if you want anything else. And again, underrepresented in technical, commercial operations is about 31%, and we've got some geography data there as well. I also did some work about second careers, but the only point I'll pick out here is that women end up earning less than 20% than their male counterparts over their lifetime due to a career break. Now, when a man becomes a father, his salary doesn't suffer, but a woman's salary suffers by approximately 20%. Now, that not only means that women earn less than men in the workplace, but that affects their pension contributions. So when they retire, they are financially less well off than their male counterparts. So we are doubly disadvantaged. I won't talk about the barriers of women returning to work, but I will just do a summary on the top tips and the recommendations from our toolkit. And that is, look at the design of the job, review it, refresh it. How can you add flexibility in there? How many times I see a job description that says, we would like an ex-seafarer. Well, on the basis that there are around 2% of seafarers are women, you're really chopping off a large portion of talents if you insist on your person being a seafarer. So do they really need to be a seafarer? Rethink the language on your advert. Use a gender decoder. I think you'll be quite surprised. Look at your selection process. Retrain for unconscious bias. Use set questions. Have a diverse panel and set time limits. And work on your pipeline. Get involved in those outreach initiatives to encourage young women, mentoring, sponsoring, and so on, and promote those female role models in your business. And introduce a systematic approach to managing people's return to work. I did have a section on really familiarization days, a little bit of reskilling and retraining, not a lot, but what that will do, it will ease a transition back into the workplace, and it will give those women far more confidence to compete on a similar level to their male counterparts who haven't had 6 months out of the business. So I tried to dash through that and not take up too much time, Fiza, so I hope that was okay.
That was perfectly fine, thank you. So, Teresa, you shared some really interesting information. And, one of the things I'll tell you, like working in the consulting industry, which I think really does work, is getting to women early in their careers. What we've noticed is it's been a lot easier to attract diversity when you get to women who are still sort of graduating, sort of thinking about careers. And I think if you get women early in their careers, you could sort of help them, just not only make a career choice, but also life choices, right? Like, when are they going to have children? When are they going to want to take a break? What do they need to achieve career-wise in order for them to feel motivated to come back to the office after they've had their child? And so these are things that matters in terms of long-term diversity. But why don't we take some of the things that you talked about in terms of some of the solutions in attracting more diversity in recruiting. And, you talked about Norway and the amazing impact of creating quotas. And so maybe Audra, I'll go to you first. One of the solutions was setting diversity goals, right? Being very clear on diversity goals in terms of what do you want to achieve. Can you talk about a little bit in your experience, in working in Norway, and your experience and when companies have set diversity goals and how it sort of made an impact? Tell us a little bit more on that aspect and what else, the industry could be thinking about.
Yeah, I think for us at Inmarsat, we've been having a target of at least 30% in our exec roles for them to be women. So we have set ourselves a target. But actually, I think besides just setting a target, it's important that, we look at the activities, because just setting a target, saying something like 30% by the year X, we don't have that much turnover in the company. So achieving that is quite difficult. So we need to look at other ways of getting those targets. And what we've done in Inmarsat is to look at activities. So when I say activities, what do I mean? So one of the main areas we've looked at is broadening the funnel. And it's pretty much like Theresa was saying earlier about where you actually attract the talent. One of the things we've done is recruiting on job boards like working mums, working dads, even breaks, all of those types of unconventional areas attract different types of people to your organization. But what we found in advertising in those areas is that you have to show your culture, because in order to attract those people, you have to be authentic. You have to show the culture that you want them to come into, right? Like Teresa said about sharing personal stories about flexibility at work, the kind of benefits and support that you get, like women's support organizations in your company. Those types of things actually do attract women into the industry, because they hear the stories, and then there's a degree of believability, I guess. And I think that first step of broadening the funnel is integral to us getting more women into the industry.
Yeah.
So I'd say great. That was the first step. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anybody else in the panel want to chime in on setting diversity goals?
Yeah, sure.
After you.
Yeah, okay, I'll dip in. So I mean, it's hugely important for. I mean, a lot of our clients are coming to us with their diversity goals. We have our own diversity goals in the business as well. So right now, Faststream globally, we have a 50-50 split between male and female colleagues. So we've done really, really well. So we can start building our pipelines for our board level and be able to balance that. I think it's about 70-30 at the moment, and be able to balance that board level split. So it's a lot more balanced going forward, and that's kind of our diversity goals that we have, and where we've come down the road. And as a result of that, we've got some fantastic female leaders in our business, really, really, really well. In Asia, our top performers are mostly female at the moment. So it's really giving us the rewards that we need to be able to diversify that as much as possible. And we're seeing the same with we're seeing the same with our clients. I think our clients probably have different challenges to what we do as a recruitment business. A recruitment business is largely commercial, and I think that the gap for commercial people is less than the gap you'll find in technical positions, like Teresa mentioned earlier on, with less than 2% of seafarers are female. So the answer isn't just recruiting lots and lots of females to work for the sea. Yes, we need to be able to increase that, and certain companies are doing more to be able to do that as well. And the IMO has scholarships and what have you with regards to seafarers. And I know some of the other companies are following suit as well, and they're having their own scholarship programs. And I know BWLPG this quarter, they've just released their scholarship program for female seafarers as well, which is it's their India, it's the subsidiary, so it's BWLPG in India. So they've kind of pledged to provide, just to begin with, 10 female cadets to kind of less privileged households, and to female cadets in even less privileged households, or children from active military personnel. So currently they've enrolled them in the Indian Maritime University for Chennai, Mumbai and Kolkata. And they're expected to ramp that up and get 50 cadets over the next few years. So that will really be able to encourage women to choose seafaring as a career, and motivate future generations of female seafarers going forward. So these are all things that help. But it's companies need to be able to set goals themselves in order to be able to make it work. And the more companies that set goals, the more companies will do it, and the more companies will follow suit as well. So I think it's important.
Yeah. And I want to horn in on the point you made about, you have 50% split in terms of, recruiting staff. How important it is, right, for a woman when she goes to the interview process, right? We talked about standardizing the interview process and sort of, kind of having an unbiased view of how the process goes through. But, just the experience of seeing other women in this process on the interview panel, of sort of seeing how other women have been successful and who's interviewing them, right? How much of that happens realistically in the industry right now, and how can companies do more of that in terms of creating more attraction for women?
Yeah, I think it's a bit different for us than it is for some of our clients. I think we've obviously got quite a good mix there, so it's a lot easier. So if it's not a manager that's a female manager, for instance, that's part of that interview panel, then the people interviewing with us would be meeting their colleagues, which would be of different diverse, would be male or female. Our clients, I think it's I think on the whole, people are starting to mix it up a lot more, and they're starting to include wider panels. So we've got interview processes at the moment where there's 6 people interviewing on Teams at the moment. So and that's mixed genders across that. So we're seeing that a little bit more. Sometimes that can take away the personal touch a little bit when there's too many people on one interview. That's one of the issues. That's one of the problems. And the soft skills are going to be harder to be able to bring out. But yeah, on the whole, we're seeing a lot of companies are asking us what other companies are doing, and that's a really, really good sign for companies to come to us and say, what's the other interview processes for some of these leading companies that are really pushing forward. We want to be like them, and we want to be doing what they're doing. And we're starting to see that. We're starting to see that spread a lot more.
Right. At least in the consulting industry, I think it's made a world of difference, right? Like when we've had female candidates come in, when they see female interviewers and they've seen them successful, because that's one of the questions they ask, like, how do you manage your careers? And when they see that it is possible to be successful, right, when you have children or when you have to travel Monday through Thursday, the women are able to do it, and that's made a difference. Paul, maybe I'll switch to you. On this topic of sort of creating more of an unbiased interview environment and gender neutral job descriptions and things like that. What have you experienced in the process with your clients, and what efforts are being made to create more of that, getting rid of unconscious bias and having a really standardized process that really allows diversity to get attracted to the maritime industry?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I sort of really aligned with what both Jason and Teresa have said from the general recruitment perspective. I guess where I operate at it is at the very senior end of the market. So it's both non-executive and senior executive. So it's not often that we do advertising. We sometimes do if there's a particular reason, or if we want to attack a particular talent pool, or if it's government related and you need to do. So it's quite a specific perspective. Clearly, as Teresa said, some businesses that are listed are really under public scrutiny to declare the diversity details and success. And again, as Norway, as a jurisdiction that's got quotas for gender balance, some jurisdictions it might be legally binding or voluntary. What I see, and the clients that we work with, is that there is a real commitment to diversity from the leadership team. It's easier to do for graduates. You can get them in for a couple of years. The challenge then is retention. It's also relatively easy at the non-exec level because you can spread the skills requirement across the entire board. And if a woman hasn't quite got a particular technical skill, then it may well be compensated elsewhere, but she can still come into the board. The real challenge, as both Jason and Teresa pointed out, are those roles where the client feels they need a technical or seafaring background. And with the best will in the world, much as we're all good recruiters, we can't magic candidates up where they don't exist. So the frustration is sometimes managing the expectations of our clients. And of course, diversity is not just gender related, although that's the theme of the topic for this discussion. Disability and ethnic minority are also real challenges, particularly in Europe, possibly more than gender.
Right.
As an example of sort of best practice, I recently placed an NED on the board of a well-known international cruise business, and we had a short list of 6. There were 5 men and 1 woman. All 5 men were absolutely, perfectly well capable of fulfilling the requirement. But the reason why the woman was appointed, not because she was a woman, but because her time as a chief executive, which is the only one in UK actually who has been to sea and as a chief exec and can bring real experience to this. It's because the diversity of her thought and what she could bring was different to other people. So actually, if you are, particularly in Europe, a white male middle-aged candidate, you've really got to be particularly strong. You've still got to be that very best candidate in order to be appointed. So it's interesting how the pressures have moved a little bit. But the drive for diversity really comes from the top. It's the chairman, it's the chief executive, and it's your HR director. They're the key decision makers. You've got to get them in there. And exactly what both Jason and Teresa said in terms of trying to provide that diverse shortlist in order to get the very best candidate, because we don't do positive discrimination. We don't want to go down that route, really. Certainly, we don't feel it's the right way to go as a firm. You've just got to really work hard at it. You've got to make sure that when you're approaching candidates, you really dig down and you source and you reference and you approach as many as you can. We front load the calls early on to try and talk to more women if we need to, so that we're not at the stage where you're struggling, because that's always a recruiter's nightmare. You talk widely, and it is a bit easier if you're not exec. Absolutely, appreciate that. But on the exec role, it's how do you bring people through? How do you keep them interested in the sector? How do you provide those opportunities? And I think the Harbour Master community is a really good example where they said, right, you don't now need to have been a master mariner. If you go and get your International Harbour Master's diploma and you get some other practical experience within a port, then that will set you well off on the career perspective of becoming the Harbour Master of some very large ports. And we have them both here in the UK and elsewhere in Europe, where the Harbour Master is a woman. So that's breaking down some of those assumptions and stereotypical thoughts that have been prevalent for years and years. Oh, you've got to be a master mariner, been at sea for 20 years, driven your VLCC or cruise ship or ferry, whatever it is. Actually, no, you don't. And that Harbour Master function is one of the most important functions in the maritime shipping industry, because you get it wrong, then there's hell to pay. So it can be done.
Right.
But from a recruiter's perspective, all of us have really got to go that extra mile to leave no stone unturned so that you really can get the talent base, but they are not huge talent pools. So it really is tough.
I'd just like to add a couple of points to what Paul was saying. At Spinnaker, we do the general level roles across maritime, but we also have an executive search function, which I personally manage. So what I have found in trying to create a diverse shortlist, Paul spoke about going out and doing a lot of legwork in the early days and identifying women. I find when I approach a man from a headhunting point of view, he's flattered and he wants to know more and he's convinced he can do the job generally. I find when I'm approaching women, they are a little bit more hesitant. They are, I'm not sure if it's right for me, or I haven't done that part of the job, I haven't, and I have to work much, much harder to attract the woman than I do then attracting the man. So I think, you know, what Paul was saying about being persistent is absolutely right. But as headhunters, I think we have an obligation to make sure we create a diverse shortlist for our clients and that we are pushing these women forward when they may be a little bit less confident, I won't use the word arrogant, confident in their own abilities.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Excellent. So, you know, on that topic, I think maybe Karen, you can chime in on this one, right? You're in a part of the world where there might be more gender bias, right, in the process, or there might be more hesitancy on women to get into this industry space. And we talked about anonymizing applications and, you know, creating that unbiased process. What kind of questions do you get? Where do you see the biggest hesitation? And, you know, what do you think helps the process sort of move along to some of those challenges that we just talked about?
Okay, before I go to the process first, okay, let me tackle why we need or why we are now practicing diversity in the maritime industry, particularly here in the Philippines. Of course, we want to be the first choice of the ship owners. We want to be the nationality that could actually deploy more Filipinos on board. And what are we doing right now? And why are we doing this? We know for a fact that the maritime industry is basically a global industry. And for us to be successful, we need to be exposed on the global kind of thinking and work practices. Okay. For a while, we have been used to what we were doing, very cultural, but now we have to go beyond this. And this is only made possible through our exposure and dealings with other nationalities, various age groups, socioeconomic standing, and gender. And in so doing, we are able to improve our ability to communicate, interact, and innovate. And we learn new concepts and systems that we are not familiar with, and we become more informed, able to think and implement things in a different perspective. And there is a lot to learn from a diversified environment. And diversity matters, for example, in our organization who espouse creativity and innovation and variety of perspectives. Admittedly, okay, women in general here are wired differently from men. I think this is basically a general concept. And in terms of thoughts and processes, managing emotions and personality, it's really a wide difference. But it is this difference when brought to the organization which can bring about the organization's success and efficiency. For example, in terms of thought processes, men are more linear thinkers, okay? I'm sure our men here will agree. And women are more holistic in approach, okay? A lot of details, okay? And organizations need to strike a balance of both, where one thought or process is equally important as the other. You combine that, and there's a lot more of ideas that will come out. And actually, in PTC at this point in time, I'd like to share what we're doing how do we promote diversity in the in our workplace? First and foremost, our job ads are now gender neutral. We don't say female or male. It's basically a requirement. And our vacancies can be filled up by either male or female. Our HR and leaders assess the candidates based on the skills and attitude and never on gender. In fact, in the shipping cluster where I belong, 68% of our population are females. So how is that for an industry which used to be known as a man's world? Second, our jobs are no longer gender specific. Crewing manager roles, who does forward planning, communications, and principles, are done by both. There are about 46 individuals in our company that does this. 20 are male and 26 are females. And they do the same functions. Hence, the organization recognizes that anyone can perform their role irrespective of the needed skills and demand of the job. Third, while in practice we promote diversity and inclusion, we are also in the process of formalizing the policy to highlight its importance to the organization. And formalizing this will strengthen the brand and our reputation of the PTC Group as one who supports diversity and inclusion, which can be reflected on our future job ads and can possibly attract more candidates. As such, PTC Group is seen as an equal opportunity employer. One thing that I would like to stress, okay, is that for women, as of this time, we cannot really fault ship owners or recruiters on the type of candidates that they want, okay? Because basically anything that man does, women can also do. It's just that we have to equip ourselves. Sometimes you hear that there are really no opportunities for women. But, you know, nowadays, based on our experience, anybody can apply for a position as long as you're able to qualify in terms of your background, your experience. There's no reason why you cannot really get that opportunity or you cannot grab that opportunity. So I think before we think that opportunities are only women, are for men, we have to make sure that we understand the requirement, we close the gaps by making sure that whatever skills and competencies are needed, the women are able to acquire it through proper education and through proper training. Okay. One thing also that I would like to share is that let us give our chance, let us give ourselves, women, a chance to grab any opportunities that are open. Okay. And then I don't see any difference when it comes to male and female. Take the case of a chef. Okay. Given the same type of training, given the same type of experience, I think they're equal. So nobody can say that this particular function is only for men and this particular function is only for women. I think the only difference where you would say that a particular position is for men is that when it involves physical activities that are meant to require more strength, which is of course very natural on the men. Okay, so basically, as far as we are concerned, we are for diversity, we are for gender equality, and I should say there's really no stopping women in getting even or equal with men.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Karen. And you know, just as a concluding, I mean, we talked about some really important things, right? We talked about making an unbiased interview process, anonymizing, you know, the application process, creating more of a diverse interview panel, and many other points. So maybe as a concluding question and I'd really ask all panelists to chime in very quickly. If there were like 2 or 3 tips or things that you'd really want people to take away from this conversation in terms of creating more diversity in the recruiting process and sort of overcoming the challenges that come with it, what is like the top thing that you'd ask, people to think about and really make sure that they are challenging themselves to really push the needle in the other direction? And I'd love to sort of get some high-level tips that we can, have people take away. Whoever wants to go first.
I think the first thing to say is that always remember that businesses that have diverse boards and diverse senior leadership teams generally outperform those where there is groupthink and you just follow the traditional way and everyone agrees. You need that challenge, so it's good business sense to have diversity and women on boards. And for clients, challenge your recruiters to really, really explore the market. And from a candidate perspective, as Teresa said, even if you think this is not for you, have the conversation. There is no such thing as a wasted conversation. You never know where it might lead to. So be bold, go for it. It can be done.
Great. Thank you, Paul.
I would just like to add that I think to really create an organization that is diverse and inclusive, it needs to start at the top. It shouldn't be an HR initiative. It shouldn't be incumbent on the HR team to try and, they can work and change the processes. They can look at their interview and selection, et cetera, et cetera. But unless it's driven from the top, from the boardroom, then I think it's almost doomed to fail. So I think the unconscious bias training needs to happen in the boardroom if it hasn't already. And that would be probably my top tip. It has to start at the top.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I work for a firm called AlixPartners, and we do a lot of work in the consulting space, which is around, we help turn around businesses and cost optimization and other digital transformations and forensic accounting. And when we sort of wanted to venture into diversity, one of the first things that came, it was really a top-down mandate where our board, our owners, our CEO sort of committed to doing this, and that's brought up a lot of change, and that sort of is really impactful as it goes down. So I think that's great to hear, Teresa. Jason.
Yeah. No, I echo that point. Actually, I think it's a really, really important point. I remember a few years ago when there was a lot of talk about the mismatch of diversity at board level, and those. A few years ago, we had a surge of kind of all of our board level search work coming through, and everyone was asking for female candidates. All of a sudden, everybody was asking for female candidates to go onto their boards, whether it's a non-executive director, a CEO, wherever that position would be. And it was a big surge, but we didn't quite see the same surge across the whole of their business. It was almost like it was a knee-jerk reaction. And this is about building those pipelines within the business to be able to have a pool of people that can go into those positions in a much broader, wider pool than what we have at the moment. And I think it's conversations like this that was all stemmed from press releases, from people talking about the issue. And these discussions like this it's about awareness. And having more people being aware of it, more companies being aware of it, in order to be able to take action. And it's the little steps that will get them there. It's just some of the stuff that Teresa mentioned with, neutral job descriptions, gender coded language, all of these types of things. Little steps are going to be able to get companies onto the right track. But don't start at the top. Start in the mass pools, particularly for the maritime industry.
Great. Audra, any last thoughts?
I think what Jason was saying earlier reminded me of a saying that diversity is being asked to the party, and inclusion is being asked to dance. And I think that's the top tip for me, that you've got to look at both sides. So, you know, being asked to the party, your recruitment processes, the funnel that I talked about, making sure that we have women coming in so that you can choose from a wider group of people. And then, you know, in terms of being asked to dance, that's the ability for us as women, when we come into these roles, that we are given career progression, that we can see there is a path, you know, that there's an equal path. So I think both sides would be my top tip, that you've got to do it at the recruitment side, but also when you've recruited, the retention, the career progression. So those would be my top tips.
Great, great. Well, thank you everybody for the amazing insights and input. This was really enlightening and exciting time for the maritime industry in terms of the change that it's undergoing and the change it's going to see, and hopefully, you know, more and more women become a part of it as years progress, and really we do you know, reap the fruits of all the seeds we're sowing now in terms of the diversity of thought that the industry can have. Thank you, everyone. So Sanjam, do we need to do anything else? Did we miss anything?
Can I still say something?
Oh, I'm so sorry, Karen. Yes, of
okay.
course.
Actually, this has nothing to do with the processes, but this is something to do on the future, okay? The way our lives have evolved. Because I think the biggest area for improvement at this time lies in what we can do as an industry, okay? To improve also the lifestyle or the practices of the maritime industry. Okay, a lot of things have evolved, but actually we don't consider the fact that we have a lifestyle. For example, the lives of our crew now are different from the lives of the crew before. A lot more married people, a lot more elderly people, a lot more women, and a lot more single women who have children, okay, would like to work on board. And yet, the lifestyle itself is not being considered by the maritime industry. Maybe this is one thing also that should evolve. And this is one thing that should be considered by the industry. So a lot of considerations should be given to the women or even other individuals, men and women alike, that has a different set of lifestyle now.
Thank you. I think that's really important, and especially like I can relate to that, right? For the consulting industry, where I used to be a consultant, I used to travel Monday through Thursday, you know, get on a plane Monday morning, and once I had my first child, I didn't want to do that anymore, and the difficult lifestyle. And I'm sure like the maritime industry is even more harder, where you have to be on ship for like, I don't even know how many months, but there is change right now. There's ability to sort of think about the flexibility, and one of the good things coming out of the pandemic is like a lot of roles could be done, whereas for maritime industry that might still be challenging, because you still have to get on the ship and handle the ship. And you know, if you're the chief engineer, it's difficult to do that job remote. So what can we do to change that lifestyle is a very important point. So thank you.
Fiza, sorry, could I just add one point that's related to what Karen just said? Inmarsat did a report on the future of the maritime industry, just on this point about, you know, the types of jobs, the types of lifestyles we have. And in the next 30, according to the research that was done, in the next 30 years, the maritime industry is going to change so much compared to the last 300 years. And the types of jobs that will be in the maritime industry will be totally different, because, you know, you'll see a lot more shorter voyages. You know, regional trade will be much more prevalent, and you'll have a lot more automation. You'll have a lot of teams onshore that need to do the jobs that once before was done at sea. And if you think like that, the types of skills that crew will need will be totally different. It'll be things like soft skills, like communication skills and interpersonal skills, problem solving, those types of skills which, you know, women ace in. So, you know, I really think there's going to be a lot of opportunities. Maybe it's not happening now. You know, we can look retrospectively at the industry, but we should also look at the future. So
Thank
just
you.
want to put that point through.
Very exciting to hear that.